My name is André Ingberts. I'm a technology director with Razorfish, and I'm going to talk today about building rich and interactive user experiences in SharePoint. So since I'm with Razorfish, not with Microsoft, what I'm going to talk about today is more best practices and experience in using SharePoint for building external-facing applications. So going over the agenda of this presentation, I'll first talk about Razorfish, who we are, what type of business we are in. Also, as we go into the discussion of building external-facing user experiences in SharePoint, I'll talk about the subject of moving from the topic of building intranets to using SharePoint for external-facing sites. So this will be kind of an argument about the holistic approach of using SharePoint for customer-facing sites. And next, we'll get into SharePoint best practices for how to do that. And then we'll have questions and answers. But feel free to interrupt at any time if you have any questions. And hopefully, despite the glare of the projectors, I can see you that you raise a hand. So I'll look both at SharePoint 2007 and 2010. The reason for this is that out there on the marketplace, there is quite a lot of install base still on 2007, so it's going to be there still for a while. And people are still using 2007 for starting multi-year projects for sites, including some very large brands that are clients of ours. But then 2010 is the new platform, and as you can guess, this is the one with all the new advances that you want to take advantage of. So a little bit about Razorfish first. We are one of the largest interactive marketing and technology agencies in the world. We are part of Publicis Group. We are a global company. We have offices in the US, in Latin America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. What we do is we build mainly websites, but also mobile applications, and we build also strategies for going digital for some of our largest clients. We are a Microsoft Gold partner, which means that we get advanced look into technologies as well as good technical support during projects. And we have clients that are global clients, such as Carnival Cruise, Kraft, Mattel, Dell, Miller Coors, Levi's, McDonald's, Starwood Hotels, and a lot more. And if you want to learn more about Razorfish, please visit the website razorfish.com. So we have also a large technology practice that is organized around specialties. One of those specialties is actually SharePoint, and we have a dedicated center of excellence for SharePoint with which we have built many sites for large brands. Here is a list of some of the brands for which we have built actually external-facing sites in the recent past. So again, strong partnership with Microsoft. We have also an offshore SharePoint practice that's in the same time zone as the US. And most importantly, our technology practice is tightly integrated with our user experience and creative practice so that when we build the system, we do it faithfully against the original design. Just to take a poll, who is from more a developer community in the audience? Who are developers? Okay, a pretty good number. Who is more coming from the user experience and design side? Okay, so a pretty good mix. That's good. So as we go forward, I think the first thing I'm going to do is first illustrate the point that you can build a good external-facing site by showing you some of them. So this video gives you an idea of what you can do with SharePoint to build branded websites that have a rich user experience. And you can see all those sites, the user experience looked like the brand that we wanted to represent on behalf of our clients. SharePoint was not what came across the look of a site. So having said that, I'd like to take another quick poll as who has built or is planning to build in the next 12 months an external-facing site for customers with SharePoint. Good news. See, it can be done. So I'm assuming that everybody else is more focused on building intranets, which obviously SharePoint is a great platform for. So let's get next into what does it take, again, at a high level, to move from building intranets to building external sites. Two main points. One is building the right user experience, and another one is creating the proper technical architecture. So building the right user experience is going to be about paying tribute to your company's brand with no limitation due to the platform. Making also the user's tasks easy. Your users are going to come to the site for the content on the site, for transactions potentially on the site, and you want them to get at this content and to the execution of these transactions in a way that's as intuitive as possible. You want also to build unconstrained rich user experiences. In this day and age, people expect more than the traditional click and refresh of HTML, but they expect rich, immersive user experiences. And then finally, a site is a lot about content. So you want to have valuable, high quality, and searchable content. Now, from a technology architecture standpoint, what you want to do is, for an external site, expose your company's resources in terms of transactions, in terms of data. So that's important to provide that. Also, if you are going to build a successful site, external-facing site, you are likely to have to go build more than just one site. So you want to create an architecture that's good for extensibility and asset reuse as well as performance. And then you have to address operational requirements for development and for maintenance and support. So all of these considerations obviously depend on your requirements. And requirements vary a lot depending on the type of site that you are going to build. So again, at a holistic level, what type of requirements do you see between B2E site, B2C site, and B2B site? And what are those that are shared? So how is SharePoint going to be a platform that helps you along those lines? So for B2E sites, intranets, essentially what you're looking for is collaboration, multiple sites, permissions, integration with Microsoft Office, offline access. But as you jump to B2C site, you see things that are more along the lines of user interface work, so branding, cross-platform compatibility, accessibility, integration with rich internet applications, personalization, and then if you are going to build transaction, backend integration, e-commerce integration, and then in order to get your customers to visit your site, SEO, search engine optimization, and to learn how your site is doing with respect to user web analytics. B2B sites are even more complex than that, even in the sense that they include all those requirements, and on top of that, you have to deal with permission and role management, and more emphasis on customization and user customization than personalization. Then you have shared concerns and capabilities that go across all those sites. Things like non-function requirements, security, stability of a platform, obviously content management. Most people buy SharePoint for its content management capability. And I'm not going into that. This is well addressed with another presentation at this conference. Search across the board, social media, which is something that's now expected for any type of site, shared component management and planning for performance from a standpoint of operational requirements. So when we look next at what does SharePoint provide as far as these capabilities are concerned, from the standpoint of what's out of the box and what do you need to customize, you will see that, so in red, we have what's out of the box. In green, what's out of the box, but in 2010. So red is out of the box, but for 2007 and 2010. Green for 2010. And then in blue, some places where you have to do more extensive customization. So you see that as far as intranets are concerned, pretty much everything is out of the box, and that makes sense. SharePoint is a great platform for intranet and has thrived very well in that space. When you get to B2C sites, yes, question? You raised your hand. Was it for a question? Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't see the camera. So for B2C sites, you see that when it comes to 2007, there was a lot of customization to be done, a lot less with 2010 that has addressed many aspects of going to external-facing sites. But as far as branding is concerned, you still are going to have to write custom code, and it's not because it's SharePoint. Any platform you would have to do that because the company has a particular brand and it needs to be whatever it needs to be. So same thing with personalization. E-commerce integration is not difficult to do with SharePoint. There are actually other products from Microsoft that you can use, like Commerce Server, to help. Web Analytics, SEO also requires some extensions. But as far as cross-platform compatibility, accessibility compliance, rich internet integration, backend integration, things are a lot easier with 2010. As far as B2B sites are concerned, permission and role management is out of the box. Customization in the context of B2B is usually pretty complex, so you have to write application extensions for that. As far as shared requirements are concerned, the good news is almost everything is out of the box, even in 2007, and pretty much everything is a lot easier to use in 2010. So, this gives you an idea of what the architecture is for building and capabilities are from SharePoint for building external-facing user experiences. And as a result, and it's pretty good, and as a result, we can say that SharePoint, like almost half of you have decided in your company, is actually a great platform for building customer sites. The reason for this, it's a web application platform that has a rare combination of capabilities of being both a portal as well as a content management system. It's also a unique multi-site environment, so you can write site templates and reuse those site templates. You can create a lot of assets inside SharePoint and reuse them across sites. SharePoint is also very well integrated with the .NET development environment, has a strong security model, also out-of-the-box search integration, especially with 2010, and fast, and is extensible through a rich set of connectors, as well as there is a great ecosystem of third-party vendor products for SharePoint that you can use. And it's also a web platform with the largest publicly available documentation. Any question at this point? No? So let's now dive into the specifics of best practices for building branded sites with SharePoint. And I'll start with, so it's going to be a discussion around 4 dimensions: brand representation, rich experience implementation, personalization and targeting, and search, and how to integrate search in the design of a user experience. So let's start with brand representation. So if you have picked a SharePoint for building external-facing sites, you don't want to be constrained in terms of representing the brand. So you want to really represent the brand with as much freedom as possible. And you can do this with SharePoint along 5 different considerations. One is customized SharePoint for branding. That is, how to use style sheets, page layouts to use logos, fonts, colors, graphics, and also how to have all those branding elements made reusable for your developers using lists and libraries. So SharePoint can make those branding elements available to you for reuse, but as we know, it's not because it's made available that developers are necessarily going to use them in a consistent way from one site to another. So on top of that, what you really need to have is a development approach that's based on a framework that's on top of a SharePoint framework. So create a custom framework for branding, and we'll go into that. Now, let's say that you have a good-looking site. That site needs to be seen in pretty much the same way, regardless of what the conditions are. So that is, regardless of what the platform is that you are using, regardless of accessibility issues or language that you are going to offer to your customers. So let's start first with customization of SharePoint for branding with the technologies that are behind the scenes for you to apply branding elements. And on this one, I'm going to go actually quickly because Paul this morning had a very detailed presentation of that aspect. So just to say that at the different layers of a SharePoint architecture, you have different means to apply branding, all the way from site definitions, portal settings, master page, page layout, how you architect your components, and then obviously how you build rich internet applications on top of that. There are best practices to be applied, which are essentially around how you separate concerns for display and application logic. So you want your markup to really separate what's for display from the JavaScript that's behavioral logic. You want to use CSS, but you want to watch for CSS inheritance rules. They can be tricky with the definition of sites, subsites, and site collections. And you want to use a modular component-based development model where your components, whether they are web parts or controls or widgets, are built as independently from each other as possible, as well as independently as possible from the page that's going to host them, so that you can reapply those components in any order that you want, as well as on any page that you want. So this said, 2010 does do some improvement there with the concept of site themes, built-in support for mobile browsers, CSS-friendly rendering, as well as div rather than tables. So the whole HTML structure in 2010 is a lot more powerful. So as I said, it's good to have all these utilities and tools, but in terms of making this available to the developer as well as enforcing the approach, a consistent approach to applying branding features, you want to have frameworks. So in this particular case, user interface frameworks. So here are two different frameworks. They are not the only ones that you could potentially apply, but for the sake of a discussion, here are two examples. An author-centric framework and a developer-centric framework. The developer-centric framework is called that way because the developer will be the main contributor to the development and branding of the site. On the other hand, the author-centric framework, the developers as well as advanced authors, so authors that have some knowledge of presentation layer development, are going to contribute also to the development of a site, to the branding of a site. So why do you want to have these two particular cases separate from each other? Well, actually, the answer is on the slide, so I might as well answer the question. The reason is that for an author-centric framework, you may have a company that has many brands. And that company may want to just have one platform, but have the flexibility on that platform to represent all of its brands as flexibly as possible. On the other hand, with a developer's framework, you have a company that has one brand, much fewer sites, therefore, and what they want to do is just do a good job at the brand representation and then make the offering process as efficient as possible with not having to train their content offers technically. So how does that work? From a technology standpoint, in the developer-centric framework, what you will have is master pages with a lot of the branding hard-coded into the master page, and the developer is completely in control. On the other hand, in the offer-centric framework, what you'll do is provide a lot of tools to your offers, like a set of flexible templates, page layouts, as well as the capability to your offers to go modify the XSLT for the rendition of the web parts and of the controls. So what are the advantages of both approach? The developer-centric framework will be faster to get to because it's less complicated to build, and the offering process is very efficient. You need very little training for people to go create and update content. But then, if you have to modify the brand, you will require a lot more IT involvement. On the other hand, on the offer-centric framework, you are going to have to spend a lot more time in building a flexible framework on top of SharePoint. But once you get there, you have achieved great flexibility in terms of how you can represent the multiple brands associated with a company. So let's get to a particular example here of an application of the offer-centric framework. In this case, the brand platform for this company that has 200 plus brands, very well-known company. I think you can see the logo up there. It's Kraft Food. The web application is the brand platform. So if you are familiar with SharePoint architecture, the web application is the root of the whole system. Then for each brand, we apply a site collection to build the site. And here are two examples of the homepage of two different brands that have available to them a fairly large, and it's only a few samples of them, collection of page layouts, and they have decided to use the same page layout for their homepage, but they went to pick their branding elements from different lists, and they applied different XSLTs to the rendition of shared component, which is in this case the recipe web part. And as a result, you can see that from a single framework and a very well-guided process, you have a very good rendition of a brand in a completely different way in both cases, even though it's the same framework. So, on the other hand, an illustration here of a developer's framework. Parsons is a company that has essentially one public-facing site, and that site is not going to change very much. However, it does have a lot of content, both text, images, and videos. So the branding representation, as well as the use of rich internet application, was built by developers. So that gives you pretty much an idea of what you can do to use SharePoint, extend SharePoint to create a consistent branding architecture for SharePoint. So, as I said, all of this is good, but if you can't be consistent in the way the look is going to be rendered depending on the environment, it's all for naught. So you really have to work on other aspects like cross-platform compatibility, accessibility, and internationalization. And let's start first with cross-platform compatibility. Well, in 2010, we are no longer in the world of a predominant web browser. You have to work with multiple browsers if you want to build an application for an external audience. And here you see actually that variations are very strong just within barely 1 year interval. The good news is that if you take two of these browsers, essentially the Internet Explorer family and Firefox, you pretty much cover most of the cases. But if you are going to build for something that's visible for everybody, you do have also to do extensive testing for what runs on a Mac OS as well, all these odd browsers that are out there. So in terms of achieving cross-platform compatibility, what's important is being able to do thorough testing. And if you are going to build rich internet applications, create a library of AJAX controls that can detect what browser is being used and then do adjustments as a result of that. 2010, again, improves on that with cross-browser compatibility that's grouped into two different levels. So level 1 compatibility is for IE and Firefox and addresses also what's pretty complex, which is compatibility with ActiveX controls. And then level 2 with 2010 is for generation of HTML by SharePoint that is compatible with the rest of web browsers. But you can see that compatibility does matter. Here is an example of the same CSS, same page for IE7. It was originally designed for IE7 and it looks right at the bottom, but if you apply it to Chrome, it looks completely different. So accessibility, compliance, it does matter. There is a fairly large section of the population that has some issues with viewing sites, just in general problem with vision, hearing, or physical control, and they are part of your audience. Not only they are part of your audience, but if you are in the business of selling things through your site, they do represent a pretty good chunk of disposable income. So over 175 billion annually in the US alone. So their needs have been addressed through rules, guidelines. First one was the Section 508 that was published by the US government in 1998. And in 1999, the first set of web content accessibility guidelines, renewed in 2008 as WCAG 2.0. So there are no laws that impose to follow those rules, but if you don't, you can get sued. And there's the unfortunate case of a large US retailer that lost a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the National Federation of Airlines a couple of years ago. So, summary of accessibility rules: your content needs to be perceivable. So you have to use text alternatives. You have to be able to distinguish colors. It's actually also a criteria for content that is operable. So content has to be operable through keyboard access as an alternative to the mouse. Content has to be understandable by addressing readability of content, predictability of how controls and widgets work, and content has to be robust. The structure of the content has to be such that it has to be easily interpretable by assistive technologies like screen readers. So the WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, group all these requirements into different levels of priority. Priority 1, level A, it's must. So it's essentially addressing text alternatives and color contrast. Priority 2, level AA, is should. And priority 3, AAA, is may. And SharePoint for 2010 is shooting for AA, so must and should. So if you are going to build an external-facing site, this is important, and it's not a trivial task to build for accessibility. There is going to be alternate screens that need to be built at appropriate places in the site. So you really want to include that as part of the scoping effort of your project. So what does Microsoft provide for accessibility? 2007, SharePoint 2007, Microsoft partners with a third-party, High Software, to provide the accessibility kit for SharePoint. And that kit helps with alternate experiences, color contrast, but also with testing. So you can use the kit to test pages, the front end of the HTML of your pages for proper compliance. Now, with 2010, what's new there is because there is a better HTML structure and markup that's compliant, it's a lot easier to build pages that are going to have alternate renditions. And there is also, from an offering standpoint, a new rich text editor that supports XHTML, XHTML, and master pages are leveraging from CSS. Now, you can also, with SharePoint 2010, leverage better from content zooming with browsers that support content zooming. And you have keystroke alternatives for navigating the pages of your site. So here is an example of what you can achieve from a design standpoint. And this is an example from the Kroger.com website that's built in the front end with SharePoint, and the back end they use Commerce Server. So on SharePoint, building the user experience, which was built with SharePoint 2007, for pages that were rich in graphics, are also including a lot of Flash components. There is always an alternate page where, actually multiple alternate pages, when you can progressively degrade the experience into something that's easier to perceive. Here, with an example, a pure text page on the right. And on the text page on the right, you can increase the font, therefore almost eliminating all accessibility issues. And that's what I was saying. It does take time to go through the analysis of your original design and build those alternate pages, but if you're in the business of working with the general public, it's an extremely valuable effort. So as far as how to represent the enterprise brand without compromise, the last aspect of making sure your site is visible in whatever circumstance is necessary comes internationalization. So I'm not going to go over strategy for internationalizing a site in SharePoint, but just say what's available from technology side out of the box in SharePoint. So you have internationalized domain names, since routing is based on names that are only following the ASCII character set. If you go to foreign languages, you can provide alternate paths with SharePoint. The most important feature as far as internationalization is concerned is site variations. So you create a source site, let's say in US English, and you create variations that are going to automatically create content sets for different languages. So that way, authors or translators can each go to an area of content in SharePoint and go translate the site content. Now, it's not the ultimate solution. If you are from a large company and your company is global, more than likely you use a translation service. And you are not necessarily going to give access to your SharePoint site to every member of all your translation services. You're probably going to do more export of content, give them the content, have them work on it, give it back to you, and import it back again. But you still can use variations to customize SharePoint and create that import-export mechanism. Now, this said, in the demo room, there is an alternate solution to that that's really interesting, which is the Microsoft Translator. I strongly suggest you have a look at it. It actually takes any site, and including SharePoint site, and facilitates the translation process without being intrusive into the site. So other features available for internationalization, language packs, additional language support for complex character sets. And the good news is that all of this is part of a deployment process to facilitate the deployment of sites that have versions in multiple languages. So the second category of the 4 things we need to look at as best practices in building rich interactive user experiences in SharePoint is rich experience implementation. And here SharePoint has a lot of tools that are made available to you. So first, rich internet application development, Silverlight, Ajax, Java, that's all available to you with different means of integration with SharePoint, whether it's a library or as part of the Codeplex. But you have also DHTML for Windows, a model window overlay. You can use special web parts, communicating web parts, to be able to update data in one web part and have that web part communicate the update to other web parts without a full page refresh. You have also custom web parts, or you can build custom web parts for manipulation of graphics, rotating content, tabbing through the content, media players. And last but not least, you can use third-party controls to create rich internet applications. And one of the great vendors out there is Telerik with a rich set of controls. So Telerik will help you with Ajax, not only from a standpoint of out-of-the-box common functionality like bar charts, pie charts, etc., but also will help you in optimizing your Ajax for faster download, but also faster communication with the backend. And also Telerik will address usability of the SharePoint offering interface with alternate HTML editors. So that's, in terms of building rich experiences, immersive experiences, that's the tools that are available to you, and you can at will combine them based on your requirements. So what's available with 2010? Rich internet application integration is made even easier with Silverlight integration as well as Ajax integration. So now Silverlight has its own, uses SharePoint client object models. So now you don't have to come up with your own object model. You can use one that's official coming from the platform. You don't have to use just web services. You can use RESTful data services. You have also out-of-the-box Silverlight web parts. And as far as Ajax integration, the Microsoft Ajax library that already existed in 2007 is being upgraded for SharePoint 2010. Actually, getting back into Ajax is probably the rich internet application framework that you are the most likely to use for your applications. And the reason for this is that with Ajax, you don't have necessarily to replace the whole page or most of the page with an application that basically takes over control of your site, but you can have little parts of Ajax throughout the page, so you can incrementally improve the interactivity of the page itself. So that's convenient. But with Ajax, you have 2 frameworks that you can use. The client-centric Ajax that's going to run on your web browser, or server-centric Ajax that's going to run essentially on the server side. Benefit of client-centric, it's more interactive. Downside is you have to load the whole Ajax code before it gets active. The other way, exactly the opposite with server-centric Ajax. In addition to the fact with server-centric Ajax, the way it's constructed is it's easy to downgrade to plain postback and regular web architecture if your users are going to have JavaScript disabled. but it's slower because obviously with server-side JavaScript, you use the server as your processor. So to give you an example here of client-side JavaScript, Parson side site, you have a project browser that shows images of different projects, and that's a display that's dynamically filtered out as an Ajax application. It's client-side JavaScript. In this case, it was chosen because the JavaScript was going to be fairly small, so it wouldn't take long to download. And the loading of images is asynchronous, so you can start displaying the page and interacting with the page before full load of content. So the third aspect of best practices is personalization and targeting. So with personalization and targeting, you have essentially two modes. User-defined personalization, which is customization on a portal, and provider-controlled personalization, segment-based, behavior-based, or event-based. So segment-based is you have a profile, a user profile, and you create properties on that profile, and based on those properties, you define user segments. And that's usually that definition is done online based on analytics data. Behavior-based is you watch what your users are doing, define usage patterns of a site, and create segments accordingly. And event-based is a combination of segment-based and behavior-based, where you target your users that you have defined through segments, and you send the content based on a certain event that's a promotion or annual event and so on. So SharePoint does have out-of-the-box features that you can use for personalization, and personalization is very critical, obviously, when you deal with customers to be able to really target their needs. So it's good to see that you have all these features you can use. So a user profile with a corresponding API and web service. You have also the concept of audiences, which is the dynamic grouping of users based on properties. And based on profile and audiences, you can set rules on content display. You have personalized web parts that are out of the box that are going to allow you to filter the content based on the profile of a user that just logged in, or potentially an anonymous profile. And then my site is the end-user customization. But what if you need more than just out-of-the-box personalization? You can definitely extend SharePoint through either a custom database that's going to have an extended profile, or with using an external membership provider like the one that's available in Commerce Server to access another application, another platform's user profile. So for instance, if you were going to do behavior-based personalization, it would be good to use Commerce Server extended profile. Commerce Server is going to help you doing merchandising as well as track what people are doing as far as purchase patterns. So if you extend your profile from an outside source, what you can do is create personalization matching rules through a list that's going to have pairs of profile properties and content properties, and your personalization just goes through that list to match profile with content. So it's a fairly straightforward framework. And personalization is not very complex from a mechanism standpoint. The hard part of personalization is to come up with the segments through analytics. So some example of personalization, again, on the Kroger website. A couple of features that are available on the site. The personalized shopping list, which is behavior-based as well as segment-based. So the shopping list include things that you have volunteered into your shopping list, but they're also recommended items based on what others have done. You have user-based personalization with My Kroger page. So these are things that you have decided to display on your personalized page. offers from my store that's completely provider driven. So essentially based on what segment you belong to, what behavior you exhibit on purchasing. And then my account page is where you set up your preferences. And again, Kroger was built with SharePoint and Commerce Server. So the last of 4 elements of building branded user experience in SharePoint is the use of search and the integration of search in the design of user experience. And I put that there because you can see a trend in general of search becoming a supplement to site navigation. Site navigation through search becomes a much more dynamic architecture than just plain navigation. So what is search used for? Search takes users to destinations. You no longer type a URL. What you do is you go through your favorite search engine, let's say it's Bing, and you type the brand name, the site of a company corresponding to a brand pops up at the top, and you click on the link. And you can say that almost all web activities today start with search, which explains the amount of search that's done daily on Bing in the US, 40 million search in Bing alone, considering that this is relatively a new engine. It's pretty good. Google, it's about 320 million searches a day, US-wide, and 2 billion searches a day worldwide. So it's almost corresponding to the size of a world population. So search is also an alternative to site navigation. It will help you with a user's task. And the challenge is that if you integrate search with your site, you have high expectations built up from your user base because they are expecting your search to be as good or nearly as good as what they do with Google, Bing, or other search engines. So that derives best practices in the integration of search, and that's totally achievable with SharePoint as you can integrate fast or SharePoint Search Server with the web platform. So best practices, design content for findability. Content is basically what's one of the most important things on your site. You want also to have only one search function for all the sites in your company for a given audience. You don't want to silo your search by site. Use metadata to help categorizing your search results and help with a drill down into search refinements. Create a search destination page for navigation guidance after the first search result, and provide event search with scope control. So good search results versus poor results is kind of obvious. You want your most relevant results at the top of a page. Show alternate meanings to the search terms, also to help guide the users if they didn't find what they were looking for. You don't want to repeat links. You don't want to show content that's behind a login when people don't have a login. That's irritating. And you want to have good titles for describing your content. So here is an example with FAST that comes from the Financial Times. And here you see this is applying a lot of good practices to search design. It's got the most relevant results at the top. I was looking for news about Niger. That was at the time that things were kind of happening there. And news about Niger came to the top. What's nice is also that the search engine found a page already with a lot of content about Nigeria, a neighboring country. So the search engine gave me some suggestions of things to read as part of the context of my search. Then on the right side, you have filters to go drill down into my search results. And at the top, what you see is navigation on the search result page that's consistent with the rest of the site navigation. Your search result page should not be estranged to the rest of your site as far as navigation is concerned. It should not be a navigation black hole. Faceted search is growing in popularity. So you've heard, I'm sure you have heard of it plenty. If you look at most retailer sites today, they have adopted faceted search. And probably the most common use of faceted search is what you see here on the JCPenney website with primary and secondary facets. So you select your primary facets to start with the main category, and then you drill down with the secondary facets, so the type of clothes, colors, etc. But this is not the unique user experience that you can build. You can integrate your search engine with SharePoint, even though these are not necessarily on the SharePoint platform, but you can achieve the same to give, with faceted search, a different user experience. So Kayak, for instance, has this concept of multi-facet selection and sliders. What's really interesting on the Blue Nile website is that faceted search is being used, but it's kind of hidden. You don't see the facets. They are not in your face. What you see is that the content, the page itself, is dynamically composed of content areas, and each content area corresponds to a facet that came back from the previous search or the previous navigation. So in that case, it's a great example of using a faceted search engine and integrating it with a platform like SharePoint to dynamically build or compose your content. So this is the end of this presentation, and I'd like to now open the floor to questions, if any. Yes?
How did you make your catalog data SEO friendly?
Okay, so that's a very good question, because catalog data resides in both the catalog management system or can reside in the content management system. So it all depends on what type of catalog management system you use. So we have clients, for instance, that have a custom catalog system that was designed way before the web, and the product names are the last thing that you want to show on the web. So what you do is you use the content management system to describe the product names as well as the content about the products. So to make your content SEO friendly, what you do is you leverage from the content management system to tag the corresponding content, and those tags are going to be the ones that are part of your SEO strategy. So your SEO strategy says, these are the tags that are going to be the most relevant for me, and you make sure you integrate those tags with the description of the content in your content management system. Now, if you have a product catalog that's web-friendly, that's information that you can put in your product description, like, for instance, if you use a commerce server. Does that answer a question, or were you asking for something else? Okay, good. Another question? Yes?
To enhance the user experience, which of the two do you use more? Do you use Ajax more or Satellite?
So that will depend on what your it depends on a couple of things. If you know that your audience is going to be enticed to using Internet Explorer and Firefox, and if you want to give great video renditions or great visual renditions that are, for instance, scalable very dynamically, go with Silverlight, because there's just nothing better out there than Silverlight. On the other hand, if you deal more with a transactional website, and what you want to do on your website is make the different steps of your transaction workflow more compelling, you're more likely to use Ajax, because with Ajax, you don't have to address the whole page. You can just address certain elements of a page. So you can be more discreet about where you want the rich interactions to be. Yeah. Okay. That's good. Any other question? No? Very good. Well, thanks for attending. for also a long day for some of you if you traveled this morning. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.